All right. Okay, so I'm very excited. We are discussing Return of the Jedi, which I think it just experienced its 37th anniversary less than a week ago. Is that right? Anybody can confirm? All right. I believe I saw it somewhere on the internet in the last week, so I'm going to go with that.
Yeah, I
So,
forget what day it was, but it was sometime last week.
what?
I don't remember what day it was, but it was definitely Sunday last week.
Yeah, something.
Like
Yeah.
I want to say like the 21st, maybe. I don't know. I work from home. I don't know what day it is.
Right. Okay. All right. So sometime recently it hit its 37th anniversary, and ooh, we got someone else. All right. So, all right, we're gonna get rolling with the screen sharing. Screen share. Boom. All right. Okay. Because then can everybody see the screen here?
Yeah.
Awesome. And welcome, Ellie, Eli.
Hello.
Was it Allison again?
Yes.
Oh, Allison. Right.
Yes.
There we go. We can see you
There
now.
we are.
Awesome.
Hi, everyone.
Welcome. All right. All right. So now we're going to get rolling. So I want to start off with what is taking place at the beginning of Return of the Jedi. It's basically a massive plot by our protagonist to rescue their friend Han Solo from the carbonite clutches of Jabba the Hutt. Yes? So there is a really fascinating, I'm only giving you like a smidgen, but there's a lot of discussion in rabbinic literature in the Talmud on redeeming captives. So I have, first of all, let's going way back even to Abraham in Genesis. So you can see this first text here in the 14th chapter of Genesis, where we have Avram, back when he was still Avram, before he became Abraham. He finds out that Lot has been taken captive, and so he gets his men and they go off to save Lot. Okay, great. So they do it by force, right? Which we could probably just stop there, but that is a lot of echoes about what our protagonists go to do to save their friend Han Solo, right? Sound good? Okay. So when it comes to the rabbis, there's also this idea, not just going and saving, which is good, of course, but they also have this notion of redeeming captives. So they would do this by money. I'm actually kind of, it's interesting because they talk about captives should not be redeemed for more than their value because of tikkun olam, the world fixing in the Mishnah, and then also captives should not be helped to escape, right? So it's the opposite of like, wait a second, our protagonist should not be going to help Han Solo because, again, tikkun ha'olam, this fixing the world. But yeah, I don't know the rabbinic stuff, what they actually did or didn't do as far as going to save people. It sounds like if the rabbis actually have to go out of their way to say you should not be helping them to try to flee from their captors, it sounds like that's what people did. Also, but definitely financially, that they tried to redeem captives financially. And by the way, that wasn't just in the middle, just in the rabbinic times, it also continued all the way through the Middle Ages, probably up through, I think, the 17th, 18th centuries, even in Europe, where there would be just, there would be people from communities taken captive, and other communities would have to redeem them. They would have to, for ransom, they'd have to pay money. So that's way beyond my biblical and rabbinic scope, but that continued to occur. And then we have here in Bava Basra, there's a whole conversation, but basically in Bava Basra 8a to b, we see that Rav Shmuel Bar Yehuda says basically that redeeming captives is a great mitzvah. Okay, it's a great thing, and then they keep talking a little bit. So they have some other stuff on Bava Basra 8b. What is fascinating to me is, okay, so redeeming captives, that's not really what's going on here with Han Solo. But I do want to thank Vera for this text. I've never come across this before, so props to Vera. Thank you so much on Bava Kama 27b, where Ben Bagbag says, do not enter another's courtyard to take what is yours without permission, lest you appear to them as a thief. Rather, break his teeth and say to him, I'm taking what's mine. It's kind of what Leia dressed as Bausch is doing, where she says, although she's actually doing the opposite. She's appearing like a thief, And he gets caught, obviously, in the ruse. So props to Vera for this. This is a really interesting, it's a fascinating text on its own. Of course, there's, there's a broader literary context to what's going on here and so forth, but just as an isolated text to what's going on with our protagonist and Han Solo, I think it's fascinating. Pause there. Anybody have any thoughts, comments, questions, queries, concerns? Anything? It's cool. So in the biblical times, it was cool to take people, like to rescue them. The rabbis are a little bit more concerned. Things have changed, but definitely with the money, they're definitely more interested in redeeming captives than necessarily just going and leading missions to rescue their friends.
I did have one thing that I thought about.
Yeah.
So isn't there something where like when like Israelites went to war, like they would take women captive and they could marry them, but there were like certain restrictions on that? Like do you think that could be applied here? Or not really? Or like would that even be counting as captives or just like marrying them?
That's interesting. Well, they definitely had, they weren't just simply captives. Like when I think of captives, like you're holding them back, whereas like in the Bible, they often talk about like you take an entire town, kill all the men folk, and then you get the women. So I think that's a little bit more. There are some other concerns, certainly when it comes to the rabbis definitely have concerns when Jewish women are taken, and then concern about them being, violated. So there are other concerns, especially if they're married, can they go back to their husbands and stuff like that? So
I actually have references to that in my first thesis that you should have already, because of the whole conversion element.
Yeah.
Because they did take captives, they were able to marry them. There were, I don't remember exactly anymore, but there were rules regarding it, because then the whole situation with the return from the Babylonian exile has to do with when they said, oh, all these foreign wives need to go back. They need to go back home. So I know there's stuff in my first thesis that I can maybe roll up and find it and then post it maybe on the event or something.
Yeah, it's definitely, yeah. So on top of, that's definitely really interesting. On top of that, so the rabbis are definitely concerned about really specifically Kohanim, like the priests, if their wives get taken, and a little bit less so if it's someone else's like non-priest wives, but I do like that. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. Jason, do you have something?
No, I'm good.
Awesome. All right. Okay, so this next one's switching gears is kind of an amusing one. So this I think is the only one in my source sheet that's from a deleted scene. But I'm pretty sure that this deleted scene still counts as canon, even though it was deleted. So basically, this scene occurs after our protagonists get away from the skiff that blows up and so forth. And then you see our protagonists, and they're basically at their ships, and they're getting ready to part their separate ways, right? Some are getting onto Millennium Falcon, and here Luke is getting onto his X-Wing. And so Luke says, I'll see you back at the ship. Han Solo says, whatever. Basically, Luke says, I have a promise to keep first to an old friend. So he's heading back to Dagobah to see Yoda. So if you're not familiar with the scene, I definitely recommend checking out the deleted scenes for Return of the Jedi, and this is one of them. This is a really cool one. When it comes to keeping promises, I don't know, I could be wrong, and someone can feel free to correct me. I don't have something that immediately pops to mind when it comes to keeping promises, but they're both oaths and vows in Judaism, certainly in the Bible, and they're called Nedarim and Shavuot, and the rabbis have tractates, they have conversations about them. In common, there's not so much like common day that people really use a lot of Nedarim and Shavuot oaths and vows, and yet it's part of our tradition. So there's definitely although usually it's more of like, I promise that I'm going to do such and such, or I vow that I won't do such and such. But there's certainly something to be said about keeping promises, even when it comes to God saying, hey, you're going to go down to Egypt for 400 years, but I'm going to save you, right? I'm going to promise that I'm going to take you out. And, there's this point in the book of Exodus where God remembers, oh, that's right, I forgot about these Jews. I'm going to go help them get out. And so there's even sort of that the God, sort of God remembers to keep promises, and sort of, and as a sense of imitatio Dei, of imitating God, that we should also keep promises as well. Any thoughts on that? We good on that? Unless anybody can tell me unless anybody has any particular oath keeping or promise keeping. We good? Awesome. All right. So anger. We had a little bit of this last week with Empire Strikes Back. I'm just going to throw this. So we have Yoda. Remember, a Jedi's strength flows from the Force, but beware, anger, fear, aggression, the dark side are they. Once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny. So last week, I had a lot of anger sources, and I really went down to just this one. It's from the Babylonian Talmud, and this text is or at least most of it is Baraita. It's an early Tannaitic text. So the three rabbis who are like each quoting each other, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says from Chilfa bar Agra's name, who says from Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's name. So each of them are all basically 2nd century rabbis, although Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri could be a late 1st century rabbi, but that's if you want a historical context for that. So here, does anybody want to read this one? The Shabbat 105b? Yeah, go for it, Allison.
Okay, I'm outside, so I put myself on mute here.
Okay.
All right, so it was taught, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says in the name of Chilfa bar Agra, who said from the name of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, one who rends his garments in his anger, or who breaks his vessels in his anger, or who scatters his money in his anger, should be like an idol worshiper in your eyes, as that is the craft of the evil inclination. Today it tells him to do this, and tomorrow it tells him to do that, until eventually, when he no longer controls himself, it tells him worship idols, and he goes and worships idols. Rabbi Avin said, what verse alludes to this? There shall not be a strange God within you, and you shall not bow to a foreign God. In Psalms 81:10. What is the strange God that is within a person's body? Say that is the evil inclination.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. So this is a really close thing when it comes to what Yoda was saying about anger and going to the dark side, right? The evil inclination, the gates of Hara, if we want to consider this as like the dark side as opposed to the gates of Hatov, the good side or the light side. This is there's kind of a similarity here between what Yoda is saying and the early Seizure.
I like that one a lot.
Yeah, go for it. What?
There's almost this idea of, the Sith are about setting themselves free, like we're going to choose power, we're going to choose to be free and do whatever we want. Whereas the Jedi are like, or I'm going to restrict myself. But if we follow the logic through, and especially like with this quote, Sith are actually, basically giving up control. They're not setting themselves free. They're putting themselves sort of in the hands of the evil inclination, where by having control and keeping that, you're actually keeping yourself free to do what you actually want, or what should be your true nature or whatever. So yeah, I like this quote a lot. I think it fits in well with the way that you can think about the Force in Star Wars and the different mentalities of the Sith versus Jedi.
Yeah, I like that.
I was thinking, with Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith, it fits Anakin's path there too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have someone in the chat. Oh, okay. This one, he's the captain. Deuteronomy 21. Yep. Thank you, Stephanie. Cool. Okay. So, all right. Truthiness. So we had, I don't know if people remember, but 2 weeks ago when we did A New Hope. Sorry, I should know my Star Wars. Okay, so Truthiness. We had some like weird, vaguely not truths in A New Hope, but in Return of the Jedi we get it kind of depends, right? We have this really awkward scene. Yoda's dead, and Luke Luke communicates with Obi-Wan's Force Ghost, and Luke said, "You told me Vader betrayed and murdered my father." And so, Force Ghost Ben says, "Your father was seduced by the dark side of the Force. He sees blah, blah, blah. What, when that happened, the good man who was your father was destroyed. So what I have told you was true from a certain point of view." So Luke is not happy. What do you mean, a certain point of view? This is hilarious. I mean, it's hilarious. That was a great scene. So yes, we have in the book of Exodus, keep midvar sheker tirchak, distance yourself from a false thing, but it's not exactly don't lie. And yes, we have, I'm just going to throw in this Pirkei Avot text, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel says that one of the three things upon which the world stands is truth. So truth is very important. It's highly regarded. It's a huge value. And yet at the same time, it's not absolute. As we see from the following text, I know the people who were here 2 weeks ago for A New Hope saw this, but not everybody was here for this. Does that, okay, so does anybody want to read it? Do you want me to just read it? Great, I'll read it. Okay, so this is an early rabbinic teaching, and this is actually from mid-first century. Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai, there are these two main academies, Pharisaic academies from the early to mid-first century of the Common Era. And the sages taught, how does one dance before the bride? So Beit Shammai says, you comment on the bride how she actually looks. Whereas Beit Hillel says, a fair and attractive bride. Okay? You say, na'ev chasuda. Okay, kala na'ev chasuda. Okay, say she's really nice. Doesn't matter how she actually looks. She could be kind of decrepit. You just say she's nice. It's her wedding day. So Beit Shammai says to Beit Hillel, so what about where she's lame or blind? Do you say, oh, she's fair and attractive? But the Torah states, like we just saw in Exodus, midvar sheker tirchak, stay away from a false thing. So Beit Hillel says to Beit Shammai, okay, so someone goes, you buy something in the market, do you praise it or do you condemn it? You actually say you should praise it in their eyes. So from here, the sages said a person's disposition should always be empathetic with mankind. So, I mean, it's such a fascinating thing because we actually see this Exodus text being used, and yet at the same time, it's all relative, right? It's from a certain point of view. So you say, look, you can talk about how, lame or blind or whatever, not particularly perfect this woman is, yet at the same time, it's contextual, it's relative, it's from a certain point of view, sure, but the guy who's marrying her is happy and she should be happy too. Okay. Any thoughts on this truthiness? Stephanie?
I always like the everything is relative theory because it's so related to human nature. But I also find this kind of like a little funny that they either miss or we're supposed to think that Obi-Wan gained wisdom, as a Force Ghost, because of course in the prequel, the third one, and he's like, only a Sith deals in absolute. And like, okay, so are you the guy who'd be saying this later? I mean, I guess so. But at the same time, just some of the dialogue. But yeah, I mean, I think everything is relative because, everyone sees things differently. Everyone has a different perspective on the same action. And that's the whole thing with Anakin is, depending on who you are in Anakin's life, you see a different side of Anakin.
Yeah. That's an interesting perspective. Like being relative to Anakin is really interesting. And which definitely comes out, like you said, in that specific context, that Obi-Wan has a very particular perspective of Anakin, right? You were saying it's fairly Anakin-centric, is that?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I come from the especially the way that they wrapped up the whole series is, I do think, I thought this before, but especially after the new trilogy, this is Anakin's story. It's not Luke's, it's not Force's story. I know a lot of people think it's Palpatine's story, and I can see that argument, but it's Anakin's story. And so I think most of the time, if you're dealing with people who knew Anakin, like Obi-Wan definitely had an intimate relationship with Anakin. So he is going to have different opinions of the different facets of Anakin that he sees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's good. That's, yeah. I thought you were actually also going for not just being the entire Star Wars story being Anakin centric, but also specifically the point of view, how one morally views Anakin, also being relative to where you're at.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that the whole, I think the main lesson of the Force is that everything is mutable, nothing is fixed, and so, yeah, you know, same person can have a different opinion. So, like Obi-Wan could have had one opinion of Anakin when Anakin was 19 and being a pain in the rear end to the council, but then he could have had a different opinion of him when he sees, you know, how much he'll fight for the people he loves at the same time. So like I said, I drove my religious studies professors crazy because I think it's postmodernism that's like everything's relative, just whatever, everything's relative. So
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I like that. Cool. All right. So yes, so that's the truthiness, the certain point of view. All right. Welcoming guests. So they're kind of used. So when the Ewoks welcome Leia into their village, so it's interesting because we don't see it on screen in the movie. She goes from her fatigues, and then at some point she comes out with braided hair and she's got a dress. So one of the fascinating things, I don't know if anybody's actually thought about this scene, is, wait a second, did she pack, maybe in a backpack, did she pack a separate dress along with her fatigues? Did she like, and also does she have hair stuff that she can change from her like combat helmet into like long flowing braids? Like, did she, I mean, she could have thought really ahead, but like, did she actually pack for that? And also, did the Ewoks expect human visitors and happen, like, how did this happen? So I don't know if anybody's seen the, I think it's called Forces of Destiny. Has anybody seen these? Has anybody seen these? All right, so they came out with these shorts a few years ago. I'm gonna actually show a video here. Thank you, still work. So I'm gonna show a video, really brief. These are some good retcons.
because yeah, really, she had to have packed it because, you know, she's only like what, 2 times as tall as the tallest Ewok. Where would they get that dress?
Thank you. It's a beautiful dress. Does it come with a spear? I think it's perfect.
All right, did everybody see that? Did you catch that?
No, we couldn't see the
we couldn't
video.
see it.
Oh, I thought you, all right. I was doing
It
the
said
screen
this
sharing,
tab
but
is playing audio.
what?
It said this tab is playing audio.
Oh,
Yeah, we could hear it.
I watched
can
it
hear
by
it?
myself.
I wonder if there's a way to okay. You know what? This is good. It's forced me to learn new. Wait a second. Let's see. New share. There we go. Let's try this again. Ready?
There you go.
What can you see now?
Now
Yes.
we can see it.
Yeah, you can see it?
Thank you. Beautiful dress. Does it come with a spear? I think it's perfect.
All right. Cool. All right. How about that time?
Yep, we all.
You
I
saw
think we all
that time?
connected
Okay,
it. Yep.
good. I'm learning new Zoom tricks. This is good. So, of course, that's a retcon. That's a summer 2017 retcon back into Return of the Jedi, which is basically the only way to explain how she has new hair and a totally new dress that she did not wear into battle, right? Because otherwise, I don't know. it's a good retcon. But basically, my point is that what the Ewoks were doing is Hachnasat Orachim. They're welcoming strangers, and Leia is definitely a stranger to the Ewoks. Now we have, I mentioned earlier, Avram gets, two appearances here. This is Avram's second appearance, although this time he's now Avraham, not just Avram, as we saw earlier in getting one's captives back here. In Genesis 18, God appeared to Avraham by Elah named Mamre, and then, despite God being Abraham's basically guest or interlocutor, Abraham sees a few folks coming his way, and he interrupts God, and he runs out to help, feed them, get them drink, etc. So that's really incredible. Not only generosity and welcoming strangers, but Abraham really goes out of his way, and really the rabbis see that as the paradigm, definitely something that we should be following. Certainly a paradigmatic way of hosting folks. And so certainly here we see, you can see my screen, right? The Shabbat 127a. Yes, you can see it? Okay.
Yes.
So here the rabbis start getting homiletical. They say hospitality, hachnasat orachim, hospitality towards guests is as great as rising early to study hall. And then we have Rav Dimi from Nardea, greater is, blah, blah, blah. But then we see here, going back to this Genesis 18 text, as Rav said, hospitality towards guests is greater than receiving the divine presence, as is written from what we just saw in Genesis 18. And then Rabbi Elazar here says, come and see that the attribute of the Holy One, blessed be He, is not like that of flesh and blood, because flesh and blood, if a less significant person was here, you can't say to a more significant person, sorry, wait. But in the Genesis 18 text, we do see that Abraham says, no, God, hold up. I've got some random guys stopping by, right? So, and then we have one other text here, it's about 127a. Rev Yehuda Bar Shila said, Rabbi Yossi said, Rabbi Yochanan said, there are 6 manners a person enjoys the profits of this world, and nevertheless the principle exists for in the world to come. One of these is hachnasat orachim, hospitality towards guests. So in these rabbinic texts, they certainly see this incident in Genesis 18 as being paradigmatic for, it really is the paragon for how people should be behaving towards guests. Is really, even if God's there, you should stop, God's nice and all, but go help and welcome guests. The Ewoks are certainly hospitable, right? They welcome, I'm sorry, let me put it differently. They're hospitable to Leia. Sorry. They're hospitable to Leia, because then after that, they're less hachnasat orachim oriented. They are more into eating their guests rather than feeding their guests. So that's sort of the inverse of welcoming guests. That's, yeah. All right, any thoughts on that? Welcoming guests, eating guests. All right. Okay, seizing of the eyes. So back in the Ewok village, we have, they're about to be eaten, right? And Luke says, 3PO, tell them that if they don't do as you wish, you'll become angry and use your magic. But Master Luke, what magic? I couldn't possibly. Okay, so we have the whole scene. Of course, you can read it. And if you don't want to read it, you can go back and watch it and relive it. But basically, here, Luke is using his telekinesis to move C-3PO while he's in a chair and floats them up, and it freaks the Ewoks out. Now, we do have a little bit of this, not the telekinesis, but we do have this idea of seizing eyes, playing. There's definitely a whole magic thing, okay? So I'm going to back up. I'm going to go 30,000 feet and go super macro, which is in the book of Exodus, there is a phrase that says, Mechashifa lo techayed, you shouldn't allow a witch to live. And then the book of Deuteronomy, in chapter 18, it talks about I don't remember offhand, 7, 8 different types of folks who use sorcery of one sort or another, or related sort of activities as sorcery. And all of them are problematic. Magic and anything related to magic is problematic. So the rabbis here, they're going through, in Sanhedrin, they're talking about different types of these phrases used in Deuteronomy 18, like who so and so, like what do you have to do in order to transgress being, whatever this is. So here is one early rabbinic text from Sanhedrin 65b. They say, what is this ma'onaim, right? What is this soothsayer? So we have three opinions. So the first opinion is Rabbi Shimon says this is one who applies 7 types of semen to one's eye in order to perform sorcery. I'm not an expert, and don't even ask me what these 7 types are. I have no idea. But the rabbis, this is the key one. The rabbi says, Zeh ha'oche zeh es ha'einaim. This is one who seizes one's eyes. So I think this is like you're playing tricks in someone's eyes. And then the Rabbi Akiva says this is one who calculates times and hours and blah, 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 blah. But the key thing that I was focusing on is what the rabbis say here. Seemingly, this is somehow lesser than like real full-on sorcery, whatever the seizing of eyes is. So, but it's basically kind of like magic. It's quasi-magic-like. Any thoughts on this? Also, by the way, if we wanted to go really back into it, so I know what Luke is actually doing. He's using the telekinesis, using the force, right? But I should have put this actually in there. Actually, put Deuteronomy 18, which is, so Luke says use magic, right? So in the Bible, magic is a no-no, right? Is an absolute no-go. I mentioned that Exodus piece, and then also in Deuteronomy 18. There are verses that like totally forbid and outlaw magic. It is absolutely no-go. And then there's a whole conversation, like huge discussion in the Talmud and Sanhedrin of what constitutes magic. How are you actually transgressing these different types of magic and employing and so forth. So magic's a no-go in Bible and Talmud, but who knows in Star Wars land. Okay, thoughts? Any other magic comments?
Could almost go back to the truth, truth versus lying thing, because there's that deception element in there. So a lot of that could probably also apply here. It's like, is this a good deception? Because it saves their lives, keeps them from being eaten, but it is also a deception. So
yeah, you wonder how much deception instead of death, like, it's funny because in rabbinic Judaism, they basically say you can, with the exception of 3 things, you can transgress whatever as long as it doesn't violate sexual stuff, blaspheming God, or murdering someone. So basically, like that's a good point. Again, that's all about context and keeping it relative. Is if this is what it takes to save your life, use magic. No one's gonna. You'll stay alive for another day. So that's an interesting way to play that. That you could get away with using magic if that's what is going to save your life. It's not one of the 3 cardinal sins. Thank you for pointing that out, Daryl. That's good. Okay, so a moment of repentance. So we have end of the movie. Death Star 2's, it's starting to go down. The Emperor has been thrown over by Vader. I'm not saying whether he killed him. He just threw him over down the shaft, right? Okay, keeping it very vague, because in Star Wars, just because someone goes down a shaft doesn't mean they're dead. So we have, Vader says, Luke, help me take this mask off. You'll die. Nothing can stop that now. I just want to see you. And then as Anakin, he says, now go, my son, leave me. But basically, he says, you already have saved me, right? You were right about me. Basically, he's, it's interesting. Well, we have this Pirkei Avot piece, and I mentioned Pirkei Avot before, and what it is, it's an early rabbinic text, and Rabbi Yaakov, I'm guessing he lived in the 2nd century. And Pirkei Avot, for those less familiar, it's really chock full of really great aphorisms and other sayings, but he said, more precious is one moment in repentance and good deeds in this world than all the life of the world to come, and more precious is one moment of the tranquility of the world to come than all the life of this world. So there is, it's interesting. I've also come across, and I don't think this is, I think this is a post-Talmudic thing, it's probably a Rambam, that, you should try to at least repent right before your death, right? Unless someone, it's probably somewhere else, but we have the notion that it's a good thing that you should repent before you die. Like, don't just rely upon death to do the work of repenting for you. You should still repent, and that's what we see Anakin doing here. That Anakin is repenting, although it's not really clear. It's because in rabbinic Judaism, it's really about verbalizing, like really orally speaking out, like I'm sorry, or I'm repenting for X, Y, and Z. And for me, killing all the younglings, or killing Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, whatever it is, like he doesn't articulate, he doesn't vocalize any of that. It's just mental, like, oh, I'm Anakin. I've shrugged off the dark side, and I'm back to being who I am. So you could go either way. It's certainly a nice story, and if you want to be like Stephanie and view everything as being very Anakin-centric, the entire Star Wars story being very Anakin-centric, then this is him coming sort of full circle and going back to how he was before.
Right. This is kind of the point of the whole full arc, at least the first 6 movies, is this theme of redemption and coming to his redemption.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure though that he is like, so this is obviously similar to a Catholic asking for forgiveness before they die, and that they definitely do verbalize, but I'm not 100% sure that's actually what Anakin's doing. I'm not convinced that we should think he was necessarily sorry for everything he did, because everything he did in order to gain the power to keep the woman he loved alive. And so what I think turned him enough to not try to kill Luke is that he finally sees Padme in Luke. So it's like, oh, I can't kill you. You are the product of the love of my life. So we're just going to leave it at that.
Wow. I never thought about bringing Padme into this moment. That's really fascinating insight.
That's why I say the new ones kind of like, they're what actually closed the arc, because Kylo, of course, doesn't understand anything and is basically just an emo brat until the last one, when he's finally like, oh, hey, gee, I can actually love people. What a thought. And so his action in giving Rey back her life is the actual redemption. It's giving up his life for someone else. So that's where I think Kylo actually closes the Anakin arc, because I don't know that Anakin really feels repentful. I'm not sure.
You're saying it's a longer arc. It's a longer
Yeah.
arc of redemption.
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
I used to kind of always think of it after seeing the prequels, after having all of that, when I rewatched Jedi, and it's like Vader keeps, there's all these cutscenes of Vader looking at Luke and Luke being hurt and everything. And I kind of think about it as Vader looks at Luke and finally, like Stephanie was just saying, sees Padme. Like maybe he has Padme's eyes, or there's something in the bone. There's just like, he looks there and it truly connects for him that this is, my child with Padme. I am betraying the whole point of all of this if I let him die. And so I do think that there's still going to be some kind of, like, I think he obviously knows that this was not the path he should have walked at that point. So I think there is some level of sorry, even if it's not, fully conceptualized in his mind. He's more focused on seeing Luke, but also seeing Luke through the eyes of father instead of as enemy, and understanding that, well, here at the end, at least in this, I have done what I wanted to do. I have saved Padme by sort of saving Luke as the proxy, saved my child kind of thing. But yeah, I always kind of retcon it as he's looking there and he sees Padme's eyes or something, and now that's what makes him really turn and grab the Emperor.
That's a cool retcon. That's cool. Especially since, going back to what you were saying in Revenge of the Sith, where Anakin's, well, it's really Darth Vader at this point, where he is, killing Padme, and he really has he has no control. It's really the dark side that's taking control of him. And here it's like, almost like you're saying, like a mirror situation. And then he's, wait a second, I've been here before.
Right,
like
right.
You were saying, like, he sees the reflection of Padme. That's really clever. I like that. I never thought of it that way.
I also want to add, though, that if we're talking about repentance, right, there's an idea in Judaism that, like, true repentance, if you're faced with the same situation again and you don't do the same action, then it's a big repentance, right? And there's, like, text to that effect. And I feel like maybe what we're all saying is actually this is also kind of that. Like, he killed Padme, basically, right? And now he's in the same kind of situation again, and he, like, doesn't kill Padme. So maybe it really is repentance on that level. He doesn't, like, vocalize it, but he's facing the same situation and he's not doing the same thing again.
Oh yeah, perfect.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. If you're going along with Daryl's retcon, yeah, that's a clever connection. Yeah, good. All right. So speaking of death and dying, so celebrating over the deaths of enemies. So this is not a dialogue scene, but it's when Death Star #2 blows up and people celebrate, right? It gets destruction, and then we have the Ewoks and everybody celebrating, yay! There's an interesting conversation in the Babylonian Talmud again, and I probably didn't contextualize this earlier so well, which is that it was edited in the probably 6th century of the Common Era. It's conversations really going back to the first century of the Common Era, but a lot in the 3rd and 4th centuries as well. And here we have, is the Holy One, blessed be he, gladdened by the downfall of the wicked. And we have this thing, but basically, I'm going to scoot down to the next one. This is the key piece, which is Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman says that Rabbi Yonatan says, what is that written, and the one came not near the other all the night? At the time the ministering angels desired to recite a song before the Holy One, blessed be he, the Holy One, blessed be he, said to them, my handiwork is drowning in the sea, and you're reciting a song before me. So, however, there's a kind of a concept that's a little bit different, that the angels were sort of like a third party, that they are not the one. So here, basically what's going on is parting the Red Sea, a bunch of the Egyptians drown, right? You have the Egyptian army chasing after the Israelites, and they get drowned, but the Israelites sing a song. That's good. The ministering angels, they also say, hey, the Israelites are singing a song, we can sing a song too, right? So they start singing a song according to what Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachman says that Rabbi Yonatan says, and God's not happy. The Holy One, blessed be he, says, look, my creations have just drowned. They've died in mass. Like, this whole army has just drowned, and you're singing? Like, I spent so much time and effort. So really what this is setting up is saying, look, and even though the Egyptians are bad, but it's one thing for the Bnei Israel, the Israelites, to be singing their celebratory song, right? They were themselves saved by the Red Sea here, right? That's okay. It's interesting. So, like, the Ewoks were definitely saved from the Empire. It then brings up interesting things from the 1997 version of what about in Bespin, in Coruscant, we see these celebrations, but these people were also under the thumb of the Empire, even if they weren't, directly under physical threat of being blown up at that moment, which is an interesting aspect. Thoughts? All right, so now we get to the potpourri section. I have 3 scenes that I thought were fascinating. There's probably good material there, and yet I didn't have nothing came to mind for me to connect the scenes of the movie with biblical and rabbinic sources and texts. I'm curious anything that anybody here comes up with, which is we have back on Tatooine, Javeliers of the Dancers, the whole Ula scene, and eventually she goes down and becomes Rancor meat, right? She becomes lunch or probably a little snack for the Rancor. Very nice. Not really sure what to do with that. It's there. We also have a really, touching scene where Yoda says, "Look, I'm done. I'm looking for forever sleep. I earned it. I have." Master Yoda, you can't die. Yoda, strong am I with the Force, but not that strong. So basically, Yoda's accepted. This is his time to go. I might have a rabbinic text that kind of connects with it. We'll see. And then finally, this is a really, really cool brief dialogue. Luke says, your overconfidence is your weakness. Vader says, your faith in your friends is yours. Not really sure what to connect that with, but those are some really, really striking pieces of the script, of scenes. Thoughts? Any ideas?
It seems like the Jabba scene's kind of like the Purim story in a way. Like when Haman goes and he's home with the Zeresh, and she's telling him, oh yeah, you go party and we'll go hang Mordecai. You know, it'll be great. So kind of like the whole idea of partying and just, you know, rejoicing over people dying in front of you is kind of like Purim.
Right. When you said Purim, I actually was going towards a different thing, which is earlier in the story where Achashverosh says, hey, Vashti, come. And she's like, no, I'm not going to go. And then he kills her. Right?
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. But it's like, and then what the rabbis do, by the way, with the Achashverosh and Vashti story is then to say, oh, and they come up with all different sorts of things for Vashti, that she, you know, was uncomfortable, all this. Maybe she looked weird, whatever it is.
Through a tail, whatever.
Exactly. All right. There might be one on this dying one, but any follow-up thoughts, questions, comments, queries, concerns that may have popped up in the course of in this?
If you find anything with that last one, I'd be interested in seeing it. Just kind of like anything that talks about, you know, overconfidence in yourself, or focusing on yourself versus looking to friends and getting help, or like having strength in a community or strength in friendships.
Yeah,
it seems
you
like
know,
there
it's
should be
interesting.
something for that.
I was thinking about overconfidence. Well, overconfidence is just the opposite of humility, except this isn't really like overconfidence in oneself. So that would not be the opposite of humility. It's like, I believe in my friends. It's not about me. It's about them. So I was, yeah, but that would be good as far as confidence in friends.
You could kind of like relate it to Exodus itself, because Pharaoh was like, I can't do anything. I control the world. And they were like, oh yeah, watch this. And because they all trusted each other, they were able to go. I don't know if it's I have no clue about rabbinic text, but kind of fits that.
Yeah.
You know, in Pirkei Avos, doesn't it say like acquire for yourself a friend or something, or like go out of your way to get one?
Mm-hmm.
So at least see that as a positive thing. It's not like a negative thing.
Right. I mean, obviously, it's hard to see even like really good, bad, or otherwise, like overconfidence in friends. Like there's one thing to like, okay, you know, like being confident in your friends, or having some sort of good friendship with even just neighbors. But overconfidence is an interesting, yeah.
Well, and the quote is just the faith. So like just believing that your friends can.
Oh,
I mean,
sorry.
Yeah,
I was getting the mix up. Sorry.
Yeah.
Overconfidence is your weakness. Sorry. And your faith in your friends is sorry. Yeah.
Because it's kind of like just believing that your friends, like it really is relying on yourself versus relying on others. Because if your friends don't follow through, okay, your whole plan to stop me fails, you know. And he's like, I know, I'm literally powering. Like, as I don't know exactly, I've always got the sense that he was part of what helped the station be ready on time. Was like he was putting force into it or something. But it's like, so I'm literally powering the Empire forward with my power. It is me. Versus, okay, we're going to split up all these jobs with, you know, there's 3 different people doing different jobs to make this thing come about, or 3 different groups of people, and they're all, if one of them fails, okay, you're done. That's it. But yet they all have to succeed, and like that kind of, I don't know, that's kind of what I saw the faith in the friends being, not so much about overconfidence in them or whatever, but really about just relying on friends and believing that they can get something done.
Yeah. Okay, so first I want to issue an apology, which I misread those, which was overconfidence is your weakness, your faith in your friends is yours. So yes, overconfidence, I should definitely put humility text there. That would be or the opposite of humility text. That's all right. That's a connection. I will have to remedy that. Going back, you know, Daryl, it's really interesting what you're saying about Darth Vader's involvement in the second Death Star, which is so funny because 2 weeks ago we were talking about that incident between Darth Vader and I think it was Admiral Motti, where, you know, Darth Vader was saying, don't put your, you know, all the energy of the Death Star because the power force is more than your battle station, right? And so it's very, we don't really have the, you know, in this movie, the only time we really hear the force being articulated is between Yoda and Luke. Vader is really not that much into the force, right? He's like, yes, this battle station or whatever it is, right?
Good point.
Yeah, I should definitely put some humility text there, because the rabbis definitely, you know, humility is a good thing. Yeah. All right. If anybody has any thoughts, you can, you know, any thoughts, questions, comments, queries, but also if you have any ideas for next week, I'm really excited because we get to start on the prequel trilogy and we get to start off with The Phantom Menace, the movie with one of the best Star Wars songs ever, Duel of the Fates. So you know, it's funny because there's a book coming out on Tuesday, which I just read, but it provides some interesting context to the movie, which is great. So Phantom Menace is like super duper fresh in my mind, and I'm really excited for our conversation next week about Phantom Menace. So if you have any ideas, and I know Vera's been sending me some stuff, but if you have any ideas for connections to text between the movie and, you know, whatever, feel free to send them my way. Any thoughts, ideas, suggestions?
I don't have for Phantom Menace right now, but I remember last week we were talking about having a death mark on you, and
Yeah.
we're talking about, you know, like how could that come up, and it dawned on me a couple of days ago, and for whatever reason I've actually remembered over a Shavuot, Kayan had a mark on him, didn't he? After he kills the Aval.
Yeah,
But
that's good.
it was like the opposite of a death mark. His whole point was you weren't supposed to kill him then.
Right, right. That's good. Yeah, General Rican says, yeah, death marks are, you know, a terrible thing. Yeah, that is funny.
But it ends up being a curse for Kayan.
Yeah.
So that was my thought from last week.
That's good. That is a good connection. I like that.
There's also different kinds of death, though. So, you know, a mark could mark you as you can't be killed because your punishment is to live with everyone knowing that you have been eradicated from your community, which is sort of a death.
Mhm.
So again, death is relative as well.
Yeah, yeah. By the way, I'm still, speaking of Han Solo from last week and his payment that he owes Jabba, I'm still like shocked from last week, the revelation of, wait a second, Han had the money from the Rebel Alliance. He could have paid Jabba, and he's a scoundrel. He's just not going to
Would
pay
you
up.
pay him? I mean, come on. Like, he's not going to pay him if he doesn't have to.
I know, but I just, wow, it was a revelation. It was something I just never thought of. Like, wait, he does get money.
I think you almost got to go with he gives it back to the rebellion. I mean, that's almost part of the only way to make it work. And I mean, I'm not actually a big fan of this scene in Solo, but that would be consistent to what they show in Solo. Since, you know, because basically at the end, he, like, you know, makes sure to give the money that what their name is. Right. But, you know, so at the end of.
He gives it to Memphis Nest.
Right. And they usually use it to start the what would become the rebellion. Like, Han Solo actually does the job that gets the money that starts the whole rebellion, which
apparently
Solo comes before Star Wars Rebels.
Yes, and actually, what's interesting I read was that the what is it, the whatever that fuel is, I should know what the fuel is called, the MacGuffin in the movie, but is that it was given to Saw Gerrera's rebels, which is interesting. And that's connecting to Rogue One because Saw Gerrera dies in Rogue One anyway. So, yeah.
And then, and
So-
too, you know, if you follow the Spaceballs correlation parody,
Yeah.
he doesn't take the money. Lone Star doesn't take the money. You know, it's like, because she thinks he did. She's like, oh, he grabbed his millions and he's out of here. And her dad's like, oh, he didn't take the money. He just took enough for lunch and gas. So I think you're supposed to assume, maybe, possibly, that yeah, Han like maybe had the money in his possession at one time, but maybe gave it back because he's a good guy after all.
I think ultimately he does get the money, right?
I'm pretty sure they say that he has the money because I think it's at the beginning when they're on Hoth and he's like, you know, I got my money, I'm out of here, you know, whatever it is. And but then he ends up obviously with Jabba. So I'm really kind of thinking that he doesn't keep the money. Like he gets it, but I don't think he keeps it.
Yeah. And even so, whether he has or not, he doesn't pay up. Yeah. Cool. All right. If anybody's interested, we have a Discord chat. If anybody wants to hop on, Daryl, can you share that?
Yep, and that's where we post links like the one I put in there. There's lots of resources like that in there. You get to share.
So awesome. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. And next week is Phantom Menace. I'm happy to be all the excitement for Phantom Menace. It's giving me a good excuse to rewatch that movie.
There's parts that are okay. I could do without Jar Jar at like all.
Everyone can do without Jar Jar.
Yeah, I think little kids are really the only ones who like him.
Yeah.
My middle son likes him just because I don't like him, and he hates Star Wars. The poor child has me for a mother.
That's good. That's good. All right. Well, if anybody has any thoughts, feel free to reach out to me. If you're like, oh, hey, don't forget to mention this, or are you going to mention this? It's okay. You can ask me. So, well, this is great, everybody. Thank you so much for joining in again. This was awesome, and may the Force be with you.
Take care, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.